Hey everybody, NFIHammer here. In this video, we as beginners are going to paint this Necron Triach Stalker. Let's get started. So this is part 2. Part 1 is me building and assembling and priming this model. Because the model is so large and so involved, I've done a dedicated video, so if you haven't built it yet, recommend go check that out. But this video is just going to start with an already primed black with this flat black primer. The first color I'm going to use is Rhinox Hide, and this is just something that I do because I find that the Sherakan Dynasty theme is quite kind of boring with a lot of just copper, silver, black and green. So I find that this Rhinox Hide on some of the most indestructible metal, such as the front claws, just kind of brings out a little bit more uniqueness to the model and a little like dash of color. But because it's on a black base, it's very hard to notice, but it does add a little bit of something to it. So there's also these front pincer claws as well. I'm using the same toughness of the claws by using Rhinox Hide on here. Again, you don't have to do this. You can use silver or just leave it black or whatever you prefer. But for me, I just kind of think that it adds a little bit of something with the claws. So this is the largest model that I've ever painted. I had no idea how large it was. I got it in the Imperium magazine, 2 different issues, so it only costs $40 dues. So it's a ridiculously cheap model. You know, buying it in the Games Workshop website, you're looking at around $85, so it's more than half price. So next is the Runelord Brass. So this is the Necron bread and butter in this color scheme. So this is quite a boring step. However, it actually doesn't have a lot of brass on it compared to some of the models that I've been painting recently. It only really has it in this kind of core shell part. And so I've also decided to paint the ball bearing things copper as well, but really I think it would work with any of the colors from this scheme. Because of the black undercoat, it does take a couple of base paints to really get good coverage up. It's not super important because you're going to go over it with a shade later at the end step, and a little bit of darkness coming through just brings a bit of variety into the model. But yeah, 1 coat just probably isn't enough. I found that 2 coats was probably what I needed. I am trying to avoid getting the paint into areas that I shouldn't be, but I'm not really too concerned about it because I'm going to come back later with Abaddon Black and just kind of touch up the areas. You can see in the background there, I've got my spider there that I'm kind of just using as a reference point just to make sure all my models are kind of painted consistently. So here we have the little driver console capsule, don't have a good name for it. And so it's a little bit tricky to paint the Necron warrior in there because he's very tucked in, but I'm just trying to get all the copper brass color onto his armor plates, his chest, his feet. And then there's also this weapon, so as I explained in my first video, I'm using the heat ray, so I'm just painting that. So this is Leadbelcher, this is the silvery color, but it's quite a muted silver, it's not very bright. So I'm painting all the legs and all the wires silver. And this to me is like the delicate part of the model, is what I use the silver for. So it's not like an armor plating like the brass, it's not the indestructible metal like the Rhinox Hide. And I find that it helps bring like a cohesion in if all the materials are painted in a way that makes sense. I'm also using the dried up brush to try and edge highlight the Rhinox Hide. It's something that I've started doing recently, and I just think it helps make the model a little bit more interesting. And then I'm also painting kind of the gauze cores, or however you want to call it, green, silver, but I'm going to come back later and paint them green, as well as any wires or anything that I've missed, as well as the tops of these Rhinox Hide front claws. I'm painting that silver. just so that those like symbols kind of stand out a little bit. But all in all, this model's a little bit hard to work with because it's so big, you can't really get a good handle on it, and the front two claws keep moving up and down, so it's actually quite difficult. And so with the heat ray, I'm just putting some silver details onto the weapon, just to make it kind of a little bit more interesting. If it's all brass color, it's not going to be very interesting. There's also some interesting sigil patterns on the back there, so I just made sure to paint the silver on the raised edges only. And then with this, I'm kind of painting the spine of this capsule like the Bambi snake that I did with the Wraith, and I think that looked really cool. So I'm kind of doing a similar style here. And there's also these sigils that are hidden away in the model as well that I'm trying to leave. The next color is Warpstone Glow. So this is the dark kind of green color. So I'm painting in all the sigils and markings on the model that I can. So then when I paint over the top layer with silver, they'll kind of look green underneath, or at least that's the plan. I ended up painting the little console control units green, but I'll come back later and change that color. I wasn't sure what color to make it. And then yeah, there's a little energy globe on its head, on the top of the spine. There's these cords, quite a little bit of green to paint. So Runefang Steel is a very shiny silver, so I use this kind of like on the immortal shoulder pads or on my Tomb Blades wings, so I thought it would kind of work here. The Triacs are like the three leaders of the Necron dynasty, and these are kind of their vehicles, so it kind of makes sense that they would have a lot of silver to represent royalty. And so I've decided to paint his shoulder pads here silver, half because it's kind of the same as the Immortals, but also half because it was lazy, and I just thought it was easier just to kind of paint it all silver. And then I'm just painting the console silver. Again, I really wasn't sure what color to go. So I've got this metallic blue-green paint from Mr. Hobby Paints that I really love. I used it originally on the Jade Warrior Model of the Month, but I've kind of fallen in love with it a bit. So I now use it for sort of like science-y energy glow that isn't necessarily gauze energy. So any other sort of Necron, you know, advanced technology. So I thought I'd paint the console with that. Not really any good reason, but I just felt like painting it green was too much green. It didn't really make sense because it's not like a weapon. I kind of was happy how it turned out. So the next color is my gold, which is my Retributor Armour. So I'm just highlighting the sigils here with gold, trying to, because it's such a large model, the edges are really raised, which kind of makes it easier to paint. But yeah, just have to be aware to paint it on the sides. Whereas normally I don't bother with that because it's too shallow to really notice. And then the sigil on the chest as well. I also decided to paint these legs gold where the sigils are. And I also decided to kind of highlight the area with the circle, but my painting skills are horrible, so I really couldn't get a nice even line around the edges. So I have to come back later with a Rhinox Hide and try and touch them up. But it still looks a bit messy. But from a distance it looks okay, as long as no one looks too close it's fine. But I was trying something completely different here because I've never kind of done this before. Kind of painting like a circle around the edges of it. But I just feel like it's too subtle without it. The sigils are very small. Next is a Moot Green color, which is what I use the gauze energy with. And so this is, I'm kind of going over anywhere that I painted with the Warpstone Glow that I didn't want to leave that dark color. And I just find that having this green base kind of gives it a bit more richer color, but I probably had too thick a paint on. Maybe a thinner paint would have probably made more sense, so I don't completely just go over the top of it and lose that undertone. And then with the heat ray, I'm just painting these little circles with it. I'm going to paint the heat ray a completely different color that I've never tried before, but I thought sort of these globes here would make sense to be the gauze energy. It's kind of easy because they're sitting out by themselves. There's also these big circles on the middle, so I painted that green as well. I'm not really sure what color makes sense, but that's just what I ended up going with. Next up, I realized that the heat ray gun has these sigils on the back of the gauze energy things. I guess when it unfurls to shoot the heat ray, the casing for the heat gun has these cool little sigils, which I thought was a nice detail. Like, normally the guns are pretty boring, like the gauze rifles and stuff like that, so it was actually cool to have a gun that had a little bit of a decorative nature to it. That's why I was kind of attracted to the heat ray, because I thought, you know, it's something quite different that I haven't done. Going back to the main part of the spider model, just painting in the gauze energy core in the center with my Moot Green. Next, it's painting the little balls, I guess you'd call them, on the legs. This is something I did with the Necron spider. I'm not really sure if it makes sense. Probably could paint it any color, but I just kind of think that's where the energy comes into the limbs here. I'm also trying to paint the inside of the ball sockets. It's something that I've been doing for a while, but I'm not really happy with it because, especially on these larger models, it doesn't look very good. I don't think I'm painting in the area very well. So yeah, definitely open to any suggestions to what I can do better for those. Obviously, I'm open to any suggestions on anything because I am a beginner. I've been doing this hobby for just exactly a year now, so got my first one on Christmas last year, and this was my holidays project this year in 2023, so I've only been at it for a year. So this is what I was talking about earlier. I use Abaddon Black to come back, and I just kind of tidy up anywhere that I've got paint where I shouldn't have, and it should remain black. So these ball bearing things, I'm just kind of tidying them up and removing any green that went onto the actual socket itself rather than just the grooves. However, sometimes with my brush I do get some black in those grooves, which is annoying. And then I'm just tidying up all the joints. I noticed that this tail section actually has some glyphs hidden on it. So what I did is I pulled it out, and then I'm using my Warpstone Glow, and then I'm putting that over the coat so that the glyphs are covered. And then I'll go back over it with black, and then I'll put it in sideways, just so it's a tiny little detail. If anyone actually looks really close, they can actually see that there's some glyphs hidden, but it probably isn't worth it. It's just something, it would bug me knowing that it was there and it wasn't painted. So with me, I just thought I might as well do it. But that's what I really like about Games Workshop models, is that there's just so much detail in it that you can spend forever just painting a single model. So I'm using Leadbelcher here just to tidy it up, and then tidy up the other areas like the top of the pincer claws at the front. I usually paint silver, so I'd forgotten about those, so I thought I'd go and fix them up. But I find the contrast between the Rhinox Hide and the silver, it's really good. So this is the metallic blue-green from Mr. Hobby Paints again. I just thought this tail section was a little bit boring, so I thought I'd give it a little bit more oomph, I guess. And then this is Abaddon Black, just painting over the thing but leaving the sigils. So then I also did something completely new. These little decorative marks on the top of the legs, I'm actually using Runelord Brass, and I'm just painting over them, just a very thin coat, and just the top layer. I'm not worrying about the raised surfaces. But I noticed that the silver on silver really wasn't popping, and it was kind of losing that detail. So by painting these Runelord Brass on top of the Leadbelcher legs. Just kind of gives it a little bit more interest and visual distinction. My other models don't have this detail, so I might have to go back and try and, on the spider at least, make them brass as well. Otherwise, I guess they won't look super coherent, but yeah, it's probably not really worth it. But it's just something different I thought I'd try. I kind of, impressed by, the more you paint, the more like opportunities you see for improvements. So, for instance, here on these sort of raised edges, I thought I could just paint these silver to kind of do the inverse effect, where it's got a Runelord Brass base, but the edges are highlighted with Leadbelcher. Again, it's super subtle. You have to really look really close to the model to pick up this. As I alluded to earlier, I'm trying something completely different for the heat ray, so I'm using 3 colors, Mephiston Red, Phalanx Yellow, and Fire Dragon Bright Orange to kind of create a heat laser effect. So I've never done this before, so I was really just experimenting with something completely new. So I'm starting with the Mephiston Red as the base color, so I'm trying to get it into all the grooves, because there's quite a beveled raised edge here. It's going to be easy to paint the raised surfaces, but it's going to be much harder to paint the depths of it. So I'm really trying to get the brush really deep in there and just give it a good coverage of the Mephiston Red. It actually was quite challenging. I didn't realize how deep the grooves were when I was doing this. But yeah. Already it's kind of looking cool. I don't really use a lot of red on the Necrons. And then I've watered down some of the orange dragon paint, and I'm just kind of dabbing that onto the raised edges here to kind of create a bit of a contrast between the red and the orange. It's probably too much of a visual jump. It would have been good to have some sort of intermediate dark orange, or maybe I should have just mixed the 2 colors together. So I think, yeah, it kind of jumps from one extreme to the other. And then I wasn't really sure what to do with the tip of the nozzle either, so I'm just kind of painting it orange a little bit with a thin coat. But yeah, I wasn't really quite sure what I was trying to do there. And so then I'm going to use the Phalanx Yellow and just kind of go down the middle of each section and just kind of put a very light highlight there, just to create another like depth to the color. My wife said that it kind of looks like ketchup and mustard. So once she said that, I couldn't kind of unsee it. But yeah, I'm just trying to paint the tip of this kind of glowing yellow as well. This is my first foray into painting sort of like heat weapons like this, so if you've got any suggestions, please leave a comment below. One thing that I did see from another video was using shades as sort of filters. I'm using Beserker's Bloodshade here as just a way of kind of unifying all the colors together with this common hue. And I'm not really sure what it's doing other than kind of darkening everything. But in theory it's kind of meant to bring a common like filter, I guess, over the colors to unify them. But now that I'm watching this video back, it does kind of darken it probably a little bit too much. But that's pretty much my first attempt. And then after the shade has dried and I've kind of fixed up some of the silver, I've just got very, very thin Phalanx Yellow, and I'm just doing like one like highlight and nothing else, just like the thinnest amount. Anyway, that's the weapon done. I'm kind of really happy with how it turned out. I think that it looks really different for Necron weaponry, and for me as a beginner miniature painting, it was something completely different, so I was really happy with it, even though it does kind of look like ketchup and mustard. Next is Agrax Earthshade. So I mentioned earlier, this is the shade that I go over all the brass, and because it's a brown shade, it kind of gives the brass a little bit more of a earthy tone to it, and gives it a bit more of a living metal, because the Necron bodies are made up of this material that can like self-heal. That's how they do their reanimation and everything. So I find that by putting the shade, just kind of makes it pop a little bit. Then for the silvers, I use Nuln Oil, which is a black shade, and this kind of just adds shadow into the recesses, so into the grooves, into any sort of gaps. The blackness pools and creates like a shadowy effect. So I'm just kind of going over the spine as well as the command console, and then in this big gauze energy things, I'm also using Runefang Steel. So this is something new that I've done that I haven't done before, is I'm using the brighter silver to kind of edge highlight the darker silver, the Leadbelcher's legs. Because I do that with the Rhinox Hide and Leadbelcher, I thought I'd give this a go here. And it does kind of create a cool effect. It is very subtle, so you don't really notice it very much. But yeah, I thought it was really awesome. So I was happy with how that turned out. So this is what the legs look like, completely finished. I'm really impressed with this model. As I said, it was only $40 dues, or 40 Australian dollars. So it's a real bargain, and it was a real fun project to do. It's definitely pushed my limits as a beginner miniature painter to the max, but I enjoyed the challenge. The console as well was really interesting. I'm kind of glad that I didn't glue it together, because it would have been a nightmare to try and paint it all together. But there's a lot of interesting detail and a lot of sort of features to it that I really liked. And then with the model glued and assembled together, this is what it looks like. It's very intimidating. I think on the battlefield it would really stand out. The laser looks really interesting, I think, because it's got different colors. Your eyes can kind of get drawn a little bit to it. But there's so much going on, and there's so many different layers that, you know, your eyes can be drawn to the console or the driver or the front claw legs. You know, there's a lot of cool pieces going on here. I'm really happy that it all came together. I was a little bit worried by painting them separately. It might look like not cohesive, but I think that's one of the benefits of Necrons, is because they are metallic and machinery, that you can kind of paint them individually and assemble it, rather with like organic material. It's a lot harder to do that because you need to blend them all together. But yeah, if you made it this far, consider leaving a like, comment, or a subscribe. It really helps me out, and it also helps out the YouTube algorithm gods to promote the material. But the Warhammer community has been so welcoming and inviting, as well as all the miniature painting content creators out there. So it's been a very long and difficult year for me, so I just wanted to say thank you to everybody who has stuck with me on this channel and helped me progress and hone my skills. So feel free to send me a message on Instagram or Threads or in the comments. Really love engaging with the community and getting feedback from people and seeing what awesome miniatures that they're working on. But until next time, see you later. Bye.